Could the plain living Amish and Mennonites have ties to the shadowy world of drug trafficking? From isolated farmland to cartel connections, let's uncover the surprising truths behind the myths. To really resolve the subject of whether Amish or Mennonite villages are cultivating coca leaves, we must first understand what the coca plant is and where it grows. Coca, a tropical evergreen shrub, has very specific growth requirements. It thrives in the humid, high-altitude Andes Mountains of South America, including Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. These places have a specific combination of temperature, rainfall, and soil pH that the coca plant needs to survive. It simply cannot be grown in the temperate temperatures of North America. Even with improved techniques, attempting to cultivate coca plants outside of their natural environment, such as in the plain farmlands of Pennsylvania or Ohio, where Amish populations reside, would fail. Indigenous South American populations have used coca leaves for generations. Chewing the leaves gave a mild stimulant that let people work long hours at high altitudes. However, this historic use is vastly different from the complex chemical methods required to extract cocaine from the plant, which need additions like petrol and industrial solvents, substances that are completely unknown to the lifestyles of Amish and Mennonite communities. Another aspect to consider is the logistical hurdle. Cocaine plantations and production are carefully policed and monitored around the world. The concept of any organization transporting coca plants or seeds into North America undetected and effectively cultivating them is absurd. Even in drug-infested areas with direct access, growing coca remains difficult. This includes the cultural and practical backdrop of the Amish and Mennonite way of life. Instead of illegal cash crops, they grow basic crops like corn, soybeans, and wheat to feed their families and communities. Their traditional lifestyle and religious beliefs make little room or necessity for connection with exotic, high-maintenance plants such as coca. When looking at the Amish, one thing becomes clear. They are a group strongly steeped in its faith and values. The Amish way of life is based on ordnung, an unwritten set of laws that govern everything from their attire to their use of technology. Adherence to these standards binds the Amish to their spiritual beliefs, which emphasize humility, hard work, and simplicity. Drug use, particularly strong narcotics like cocaine, directly contradicts this worldview. It is regarded as a serious moral shortcoming and an affront to the community's common beliefs. However, no group of people is immune to external influences or personal weaknesses. The link between the Amish and drugs is mostly anecdotal and based on isolated incidents rather than a systematic concern. One such case occurred in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania in the 1990s. Two young Amish guys were addicted to cocaine and began selling little amounts to other Amish adolescents. The drugs were obtained through construction work that brought these men into contact with outside forces, notably motorcycle gang members. This was not simply a local embarrassment, it made national headlines. The case drew unwanted attention to the Amish, who normally avoid public scrutiny. Over 100 members of their church traveled to court to serve as character witnesses for these young men. The purpose was not to justify their conduct, but to highlight how they were a departure from their community's moral compass. Both men were sentenced to prison, and the incident served as a wake-up call for Amish officials to tighten their oversight of their community's interactions with others. The impact on the community could not be underestimated. The Amish are largely secluded by choice, therefore internal infractions like this are taken seriously. Maidung, or shunning, is the church's technique for dealing with concerns, and it ensures that individuals who stray too far are corrected. When someone is shunned, they lose access to communal assistance and become socially isolated unless they confess and repent. Though harsh, this practice emphasizes the Amish's commitment to maintaining moral purity within their community. This singular incident does not indicate a broader trend of Amish drug use. If anything, it emphasizes how uncommon violations of their moral code are. Their community's tight social structures, along with their intolerance to modern culture, makes them especially unlikely candidates for systemic drug use or trafficking. If anything, these stories serve as warning tales about what occurs when the confines of their closed society collide with the volatility of the outside world. The Mennonites, known for their fervent faith and hard-working lifestyle, have long been seen as a group far apart from criminal activity. Their beginnings can be traced back to the 16th century during the Protestant Reformation, when they developed as an Anabaptist sect dedicated to peace, nonviolence, and simple, natural living. However, while most Mennonites adhere strictly to these beliefs, the worldwide nature of the drug trade has found ways to abuse even the most unlikely populations. One such startling incident occurred in northern Mexico, where several Mennonite groups had arrived decades before. Originally from Canada, these congregations relocated to Mexico in search of religious freedom and cheap farmland. They established themselves as some of the region's most successful agricultural producers, converting vast swaths of desert into arable land through sheer determination. Their contributions to Mexico's agricultural sector established them as legitimate producers of maize, soybeans, and other staple commodities. However, their isolated way of life, with a preference for limited government intervention and lonely farmlands, drew the interest of drug gangs looking for safe zones to conduct their operations. The Mexican drug traffickers, especially the famed Sinaloa cartel, recognized unique opportunities to exploit Mennonite settlements. Their farms and rural airstrips, which were generally remote from urban areas, provided ideal infrastructure for offloading, refueling, and storing illicit substances. This relationship, as surprising as it may appear, was not a community-wide issue, but rather a series of isolated occurrences in which individual farmers and townspeople were persuaded or enticed to assist with criminal businesses. Some were enticed by financial troubles, while others were intimidated by threats of violence. The Mennonites' peaceful and submissive temperament possibly left them more exposed to these predatory tactics. What surprised the outside world was the metamorphosis of a few people from conventional crop farmers to members of a worldwide cocaine trafficking network. The use of Mennonite airstrips for drug smuggling indicated an intersection of desperation, threat, and opportunity that criminal organizations exploited. Such activities, according to the Mennonites engaged, violated their religious precepts, generating communal separation and internal condemnation. The broader Mennonite community remained mostly uninvolved, focusing on humility and communal principles. However, the association with high-profile cartel involvement elevated these instances. For the rest of the world, it served as a sharp warning that even the most dedicated organizations could not completely shield themselves from the far-reaching claws of the lucrative and deadly drug trade. Few stories linking Mennonite communities to drug trafficking are as compelling or comprehensive as the one of Franz Cowenhoffen, a Mennonite farmer on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. His story reads like a tragedy, a guy driven by despair, drawn into the world of crime, and eventually consumed by it. Cowenhoffen was born within a Mennonite religious community and grew up following rigorous church norms. These regulations governed not only spiritual rituals, but also daily life, how to dress, what tools to use, and how to interact with the outside world. His hamlet, Las Flores, was one of numerous Mennonite settlements in the Yucatan region that were founded intentionally to escape outside influences. Local Mennonites took pleasure in their farming skills, with families owning large plots of soybeans and maize, remaining true to their agrarian traditions. Cowenhoffen's life took a dark turn when his wife became critically ill. Her surgeries and medical demands depleted both their funds and the communal health fund on which Mennonites relied. When the health fund stopped providing financial support, Cowenhoffen found himself in deep debt. Soon after, circumstances aligned to bring him into direct touch with drug traffickers operating in the area. A man known as El Carpintero approached him with an attractive and unlawful offer: clear a landing strip for drug planes, and he would receive $20,000 per flight. Cowenhoffen initially justified his participation as a short-term solution to a long-standing family dilemma. But as the money rolled in, he was drawn deeper into the criminal underworld. His involvement in the cartel's operations quickly extended. He started arranging drug shipments, organizing logistics for landing spots, and assuring the safe transit of kilos upon kilograms of cocaine. According to court documents, Cowenhoffen earned up to $325,000 every shipment while working for the cartel, a number that would be impossible to achieve through legitimate farming. The work was not without risks. Cowenhoffen was responsible for a team of heavily armed guards, including former operatives from Guatemala's vicious military force. His depositions later showed that his armament included machine guns designed to fire down helicopters, which are as alien to the Mennonite faith as drug trafficking itself. Despite giving the impression of a simpler farmer, his lifestyle began to show cracks. Reports appeared of additional motorcycles, four-wheel vehicles, and security patrols on his property. Eventually, Cowenhoffen's operations turned violent. He transitioned from logistics coordinating to plain criminal enforcement. When associates betrayed or undercut him, the results were fatal. Family members involved in his dealings suffered untimely deaths, and tensions rose among his own neighborhood. His excommunication from the Las Flores Church distanced him further from his Mennonite origins. He was no longer bound by its rules or the security it provided. Instead, he was fully submerged in the cartel's cruel hierarchy. Franz Cowenhoffen's situation involves both economic hardships and moral turmoil. Financial desperation drove him down the slippery slope. But once there, the distinction between survival and crime blurred beyond recognition. His story also demonstrated how drug gangs exploit and influence people, including those from sheltered religious groups. Cowenhoffen's faith was inevitable as authorities zeroed in on his activities. His prosecution revealed the scope of his activities within the cartel and refocused attention on Mennonite settlements in Mexico. His acts served as a clear reminder to his fellow Mennonites about the risks of giving into financial pressures, but they also highlighted the importance of migration, seclusion, and unintentional involvement with forces beyond their control. The Amish and Mennonite communities are well known for their deliberate isolation from the modern world. This distinction is not an accident. It is a conscious attempt to preserve a way of life based on faith, tradition, and simplicity. However, while isolation is beneficial in retaining cultural and spiritual identity, it also creates vulnerabilities that have been exploited by outsiders with less than noble motives. The benefits of this isolation are evident. By avoiding popular technology, modern conveniences, and societal trends, both groups preserve a lifestyle that promotes self-sufficiency and strong social bonds. Children are raised within a coherent moral framework, which is guided by Ordnung for Amish, or church-established norms for Mennonites. They grow up in circumstances free of common modern distractions, such as smartphones, social media, and binge-worthy TV shows. Farming, animal care, and crafting are all part of everyday life, fostering a sense of community. Because of this emphasis on social living, neighbors are well acquainted. Deviations in behavior are immediately identified, and support systems, such as assisting during harvest or caring for neighbors after a hardship, guarantee that everyone feels linked. Most of the time, isolation creates a safe and predictable atmosphere. However, there was another side to this self-imposed seclusion, one that can be deadly in rare and unforeseen circumstances. While seclusion protects communities, it also shields them from law enforcement and scrutiny. Outsiders like drug cartels and other criminal organizations have taken advantage of the physical and cultural divide. Mennonite villages in Mexico, for example, were initially appealing to drug gangs due to their distant location, which allowed covert activities to go undetected for years. Far-flung airstrips on Mennonite farms became refueling points for planes transporting millions of dollars in cocaine. For criminal organizations like the Sinaloa Cartel, remote communities had logistical advantages that few other locations could match. Ironically, the characteristics that make Amish and Mennonite communities resilient, self-governance and rejection of outside interference, created blind spots. These groups frequently resolve problems informally, avoiding involvement from local law enforcement or government authorities. Although intended to protect them from secular influence, this reticence in certain situations permitted criminal conduct to slip in unobserved. Cartels understood this dynamic and used it to their advantage. However, collaboration was not something these groups sought out. It is critical to remember that the majority of outsider invasions were motivated by duress or deception. Consider the Mennonite families of Mexico. For many, cartels provided an option between cooperation and violence. Grant access to crops or face severe repercussions. When criminal gangs operate in corrupt political environments, victims of coercion have little options. Furthermore, solitude might impair knowledge. For communities that reject television, the internet, and other forms of mass communication, understanding the entire magnitude of cartel or criminal network dangers might be difficult. External criminals, like traffickers looking for hidden routes or storage facilities, can take advantage of this lack of awareness. Individuals in these groups may experience great pressure over time, with no easy method to seek assistance. However, when injustice is detected, both the Amish and Mennonite communities take action. Violators of communal ideas or collaborators with external criminals are frequently excommunicated and shunned, demonstrating their seriousness about these issues. Nonetheless, their isolation attracts those looking to exploit others. It's a two-edged sword, protective, but in rare situations, dangerously vulnerable. Isolation, in its dual character, reveals something important about these groupings. They have successfully maintained a way of life for generations, demonstrating the power of boundaries, commitment, and community. Their stories, however, serve as a reminder that no group, no matter how distant, is completely immune to external forces. The concept of Mennonites being involved in cartel activities may sound strange, almost unbelievable. These communities are frequently distinguished by faith, pacifism, and simplicity. Yet reality has demonstrated how external forces, such as drug cartels, can use even the most sheltered organizations. Mennonite communities, particularly in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, have found themselves in the crosshairs of one of the world's most formidable criminal organizations, the Sinaloa Cartel. How did this occur? The solution lies in geography, circumstances, and coercion. Mennonite villages in northern Mexico were founded primarily to provide religious freedom and agricultural opportunities. Families transformed barren deserts into productive farms, growing soybeans, maize, and other crops. Their communities flourished on self-sufficiency and productivity, avoiding close relationships with the larger Mexican culture and its challenges. However, cartels were aware of the Mennonites for two reasons. First, their farms and distant airfields provided ideal settings for clandestine activities. Second, the community's seclusion and reputation for neutrality made them less likely to be targeted by law enforcement. Criminal organizations, such as the Sinaloa Cartel, approached Mennonite farmers with proposals posing as commercial opportunities. For example, some farmers were paid large sums of money to prepare landing strips on their lands for planes transporting cocaine. These strips became critical refueling and storage points along the long drug transit route from South America to the United States. Transporting narcotics through more traditional methods became more dangerous due to heightened patrols by authorities, so cartels sought for rural and isolated partners, willing or unwilling. What began as straightforward agreements, lease your land, no questions asked, quickly devolved into something much more sinister. Mennonite farmers who became implicated describe a gradual transition from reluctant engagement to full-fledged involvement in the supply chain. The money was often too tempting to pass up, especially for those in financial need. Several farmers received hundreds of thousands of dollars per shipment, much above their typical profits from legal farming. A single plane load may transport 500 kilograms of cocaine, making refueling stops an essential component of a cartel's logistics network. Those who resisted faced severe repercussions. Cartels increasingly used coercion, threatening families and community members to gain compliance. Some Mennonites were obliged to do considerably more than just lease land, such as store narcotics and transport them. Some even became supervisors of highly organized operations, coordinating planes, safeguarding cargo, and ensuring security. The culture shock in these communities was tremendous. For a group that values peace and humility, the encounter with cartel violence and greed generated enormous internal conflict. Mennonite ideas of communal accountability began to clash with the harsh realities of criminal activity. Shunning, excommunication, and communal disintegration grew more common as members were imprisoned or exiled for their involvement in cartel operations. At the same time, this commitment frequently resulted in unforeseen effects for the greater Mennonite network. Law enforcement crackdowns in cartel-affiliated regions did not always distinguish between innocent community members and those engaged in illegal operations. Raids and arrests in Mennonite settlements devastated their agricultural utopias, replacing them with an unjustified link with drug trafficking. Understanding these occurrences necessitates understanding the big picture. The vast majority of Mennonites have no involvement to criminal organizations, and many regard these incidents as terrible outliers. However, these times highlight the vulnerability of close-knit, sheltered groups when external pressure becomes unbearable. They remind us that faith, solitude, and simplicity cannot fully protect a people from the world's darker forces. The conversion of Mennonite-run farms into cartel assets was more than just a logistical achievement for the criminal underworld. It also symbolized a moral and cultural confrontation. For generations, Mennonite communities have maintained identities based on religious devotion, humility, and nonviolence. Their involvement in worldwide cocaine trafficking is one of the most visible illustrations of how financial desperation, violent coercion, and exploitation can disturb even the most steady practices. Ultimately, Mennonite cartel actions have broader effects. They demonstrate how even peaceful, secluded communities can be swayed by external pressure. They raise grave issues about the economic and political underpinnings that allow cartels to dominate regions such as Mexico. For those caught in this web, the consequences go beyond legal penalties. It erodes the trust and integrity of communities founded on centuries-old beliefs. The Amish and Mennonite communities are founded on faith, mutual accountability, and a shared commitment to preserving their cultural and religious traditions. However, when behaviors inside these communities cross into criminal territory, such as drug trafficking, the punishment is typically immediate, severe, and based on their deeply held beliefs. To understand how these organizations handle internal infractions, examine their rituals of excommunication, or maidang, and shunning, both of which are effective weapons for communal discipline. Excommunication is more than a symbolic gesture in these communities. It is a practical method for preserving the group's moral and spiritual integrity. When a member breaks basic tenets, whether by yielding to external temptations, as in rare criminal cases, or by internal moral failings, church leaders frequently have little choice but to impose maidang. When someone is excommunicated, they are effectively removed from their community. Friends, family members, and even spouses are advised to avoid social or physical contact with the individual until they thoroughly confess their sins and display genuine repentance. Shunning is intended to bring the individual back into conformity with the ideals of the community, rather than as a punishment. It's a sobering reminder that their identity and support system are inextricably linked to the common good and commitment to biblical principles. Shunning, on the other hand, can seem terribly alienating for the recipient, a sharp contrast to the warmth, connection, and interdependence they undoubtedly experienced prior to being thrown out. This approach helps to explain why the Amish and Mennonites have such low overall criminal involvement rates. The fear of losing one's whole social network serves as a strong deterrent. For the majority of members, the risk of alienation from their close-knit community outweighs the potential benefits of illegal actions. However, these measures are not without problems. When criminal activity is discovered within a group, passions run high, and conflicts frequently arise. While the majority of members may see excommunication as a necessary step towards maintaining communal order, others may privately sympathize with the outcast. For example, in circumstances where people commit crimes as a result of financial hardship, such as growing healthcare expenses or poverty, it is recognized that desperation, rather than malice, may have driven their behavior. A significant example of this was in the Mexican Mennonite settlements, where some people, such as Franz Cowenhoffen, were coerced into cartel operations due to economic necessity. While the community overwhelmingly criticized his conduct, other people struggled with the moral complexities of his predicament. Did he deserve utter ostracism for doing what he believed was essential to support his family? This contradiction highlights a deeper trend in such cases. Faith and forgiveness frequently clash with the hard realities of existence in an increasingly linked and volatile world. Private feeling is not the only source of division within these communities. Practical implications also emerge. For example, should the outcast be banned from using common resources even if their punishment causes their family to struggle to satisfy basic necessities? What happens if they try to take part in collective farming, church events, or other daily activities? These concerns illustrate the difficult balancing act of enforcing strong moral norms while remaining sensitive to human fallibility. Another thing to consider is how these offenses influence the community's reputation among outsiders. Both Amish and Mennonites place a high priority on their public image as peaceful, law-abiding, and religious people. Individual criminal involvement, whether in drug trafficking or other illicit activities, can appear like an existential threat, casting a shadow over the entire community despite the actions being a small anomaly. For example, during the Pennsylvania cocaine case in the 1990s, Amish church members were quite concerned about how the media portrayed their role. More than 100 Amish people attended court proceedings, not to condone the accused behavior, but to emphasize that these two young men did not represent their faith's greater ideals. Their presence was a nonverbal expression of disapproval, accompanied by a vow to solve such issues internally and prevent them from recurring. Finally, it is important to note that excommunication is not only emotionally taxing for the person being ostracized, it can also have a negative impact on the community. The The death of a member means less assistance during harvest, fewer hands to carry out common tasks, and the anguish of breaking off relations with loved ones. Families frequently find themselves split between their love for the outcast and their communal commitment to respect the church's directives. In the rare occasions where an individual is excommunicated for criminal activity, the ramifications are twofold. On the one hand, the community promotes a zero-tolerance policy for behavior that harms their reputation or endangers others. On the other hand, this separation reduces their power over the offender, making them more vulnerable to further criminal activity or rejection of their faith entirely. These internal dynamics mirror the ideals central to Amish and Mennonite life: unshakable faith, accountability to one another, and a yearning for atonement. Individuals attracted to drug trafficking or other illegal activities demonstrate that no group, no matter how isolated or pious, is completely immune to external forces. Nonetheless, the rapid and ethical response to such ordeals conveys a vital message about resilience, self-governance, and the possibility of reconciliation. By handling these obstacles, Amish and Mennonite communities show how moral frameworks and tradition impact their reaction to the modern world's unexpected complexities. At their core, they are united in their view that faith and responsibility may eventually bring even the most rebellious people back into the fold. Pop culture has long been fascinated by the collision of unexpected realms. When it comes to presenting Amish and Mennonite communities, TV shows and films frequently use a combination of curiosity, misunderstanding, and sensationalism. This is especially evident in their fictional depictions of drug trafficking, which appears to be diametrically opposed to the principles that these religious groups uphold. But how does the drama generated for entertainment compare to real-life events? What impact do these portrayals have on public perception? One of the reasons Amish and Mennonite drug trafficking stories captivate the public's attention is their inherent contradiction. These organizations are associated with pacifism, simplicity, and a rejection of modernity, so the prospect of their engagement as a high-tech, high-violence industry, such as drug trafficking, is both surprising and exciting. Pure, a Canadian TV drama, capitalizes on this discrepancy. The series takes the idea of Mennonite drug runners and creates an intriguing, character-driven drama around it. Pure tells the story of a Mennonite preacher who reluctantly joins a drug trafficking network in order to save his village. The show presents Mennonites as both victims and reluctant accomplices, emphasizing how fear, compulsion, and financial desperation drive some people to illegal conduct. While the series is heavily based on fiction, the plot is inspired by real-life incidents in Canada and Mexico, where a few Mennonites did participate in drug trafficking networks. However, these actual events were solitary people rather than entire communities or religious leaders, an essential distinction that is sometimes obscured in dramatizations. Similarly, films or documentaries that focus on criminal activities and unexpected cultural situations frequently heighten the drama for storytelling purposes. While these fictional works might raise awareness of unusual or secret experiences, they occasionally overemphasize spectacular elements, leading viewers to form broad and incorrect assumptions about entire populations. It is critical to distinguish between creative freedom in storytelling and verified realities. The narrative motif of the reluctant criminal, portrayed in Pure and other portrayals, frequently depicts individuals being forced into crime because of fear or moral duty. While this provides for compelling on-screen drama, real-world cases are less nuanced. Individuals in Mexico, such as Franz Cowenhoffen, joined drug cartels out of financial necessity, but they also managed large operations, leading teams and arranging cocaine shipments, moves that were more deliberate than reluctant. The portrayal of Mennonites using remote fields and airstrips in smuggling activities contains parts of truth, as such circumstances did provide logistical advantages to cartels. However, the broad organized engagement shown in literature differs from reality, in which criminal actions were perpetrated by a handful of persons inside a community, frequently violating their church's beliefs and norms. Such anecdotes are the exception and not the rule. For the Amish, the attention has shifted away from smuggling and towards isolated incidents of young people experimenting with drugs or becoming addicted. Consider the Pennsylvania case involving two Amish men who became small-time cocaine dealers in the 1990s. While significant, their actions do not reflect the Amish's overall conduct or principles. However, Fictional narratives frequently exaggerate single instances to infer systemic involvement, resulting in an inaccurate impression of these groups. The combination of fictitious storytelling and real-life inspiration might distort popular perceptions of Amish and Mennonite communities. For individuals unfamiliar with these communities, depictions in shows such as pure or crime films may lead to long-term preconceptions. Many viewers struggle to distinguish between particular occurrences and broader cultural norms. After viewing a dramatization, one could logically, but mistakenly, question, are Mennonite cartels a real thing? This impact is exacerbated by the internet and social media, where fictitious narratives and real-life cases are frequently discussed concurrently without clarity. Articles summarizing shows like Pure may highlight genuine Mennonite involvement in drug trafficking in Mexico, giving the impression that these instances are common or ongoing, despite the fact that they are rare and historically limited to a few cases. The issues faced by Amish communities are similar. Film depictions frequently simplify the Amish way of life to aesthetics, bonnets, buggies, and barn raisings, while adding drama that distorts their reality. When fictionalized stories about drugs, corruption, or crime are superimposed on this reduced image, they perpetrate a stereotype rather than promote knowledge. Broad-brush depictions risk overshadowing the underlying virtues of religion, humility, and hard work that constitute these communities. Despite its flaws, popular culture's infatuation with Amish and Mennonite stories isn't all negative. Shows and films highlight these people in unusual and dramatic ways, bringing attention to cultures that might otherwise go untouched by a worldwide audience. When done wisely, depictions can elicit questions about why and how people from sheltered societies occasionally enter criminal environments, leading to deeper discussions about human vulnerability, external pressure, and how desperation drives behavior. However, creators are responsible for striking a balance. Nuanced narrative can respect these communities' integrity while also exploring the difficulties of their occasional encounters with crime. When pop culture overlooks background in favor of drama, it risks misleading audiences and perpetuating stereotypes. Viewers must approach pop culture tales with a critical eye. Stories can combine reality and creativity in captivating ways, but real-world communities like the Amish and Mennonites have rich, complex histories that defy simplistic depictions. More materials, such as movies, intelligent essays, or programs that interact directly with these people, could help to demystify these cultures without resorting to shock value. Finally, fiction draws on real life, but it is not constrained by it. The link between Amish, Mennonite, and drug trafficking myths is both instructive and cautionary, demonstrating how quickly fact and fiction can converge. These stories encourage us to dig deeper, separating pop culture's created drama from the everyday realities of the communities it depicts. The accounts about Amish and Mennonite connections to cocaine trafficking highlight the complexities of human behavior. Even groups committed to peace and simplicity are susceptible to temptation and suffering. However, it is evident that these occurrences are outliers among communities that are mainly dedicated to their faith and ideals. If you enjoyed this video, then drop us a like, subscribe, and share to someone who you think will be interested in this as well. Until next time, stay curious and continue to explore surprising intersections like these on Savvy Results.